Hi everyone. Today we have got a very special guest, Saksham, who is an editor at Penguin and is also a very dear friend of mine. His first novel, Samsara, recently hit the market and it is receiving rave reviews everywhere and is being touted as India's answer to Harry Potter. So we managed to get a few minutes from his schedule and we got a sneak peek into his life as an author, as an editor, and like the world he is building through his stories. So guys, watch this very special interview. You will surely like this. So, Saksham, tell us about this book. Like, how did you thought about the plots and everything? Like, what all went into writing this book?
Uh, a long journey definitely is behind the making of Samsara. I think the idea initially happened when I was sitting with my friend Aditya and we were sitting in 12th grade, having read Harry Potter and Percy Jackson so many times. We were very keen to try and bring out something similar for our rich heritage and culture, mythology, which for whatever reason even today remains untapped. And unsatisfied, we took it upon ourselves to try and execute something of that sort, try and bring about, if I may, in one line, India's version to Harry Potter.
So there are so many mythological fictions coming up
Right.
these days. So what is different about this book? Why should anyone read this book?
Very good question. I see the two reasons particularly. Firstly, Hindu mythology is so diverse. It's existed for 4,000 years. But for whatever reason, the first 1 to 2,000 years continue to be ignored. From the early sacred texts, the Rig Vedas, and the three that followed, from the Upanishads, the Puranas, they are equally, if not more, rich in lore, in gods that remain unexplored. Oftentimes, the mythology that's existing today, the books that the fiction books around mythology that exist today, center around the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. Except Samsara has a special focus on the Rig Veda, and I think its protagonist Indra, as it is in the sacred books, is the protagonist in Samsara, and that's what sets it apart. And the second reason I feel Samsara is so different from the other mythology books, which is also another reason why it took 10 years to execute, is the world building. There's an actual living, breathing world that readers will see on the 4th page of the book that has been painstakingly created over this long journey. And the hope is that it will have that same sort of soft power or that attraction as any other famed mythology or fiction fantasy book that exists in the market.
So is it kind of a retelling of an existing story, or like is it a whole new world altogether?
It's a reimagination of one of our most sacred texts. So imagine learning the Rig Veda, the earliest sacred text of the oldest religion in the world, through a fiction story, but dished out through the means of a world that is independent of any particular book, yet has the core tenets of it. So for example, Vanyasa, which is the world in Samsara, follows the sort of society that had existed and that sort of embodies the time in which the Rig Veda was written.
So I think a lot of research might have been gone into this book. So
Yeah.
Can you like touch upon those subjects? Okay, what were the areas of
Yeah.
your research, and
Yes.
like how did you incorporated them into your book?
Right, right. So, of course, the Rig Veda was the first of the two key areas of research that I needed to tackle and look into. So, the Rig Veda was a challenge in itself because it is believed that early sacred book is not meant to be read; it's meant to be experienced. But people have taken they have tried their own luck. There is Wendy Doninger's slightly more anglicized version that I read, and at the same time, to make sure that my perspective was balanced, and which actually ended up being a lot more enlightening, was Rishi Ved's translation of the Rig Veda from the Sanskrit to the Hindi. And interestingly, I was reading a second degree translation because I wanted to understand better. So I was reading a translation of the Hindi to the English. So from the original Sanskrit to the Hindi, and I was reading a translation of that. But this was the first aspect of the research that went into it. And of course, second, the protagonist of the book, Lord Indra, king of the gods, king of the sky, and perhaps one of the oldest gods in Hindu mythology. And his sort of fall from grace, from having the throne, from being the wielder of the bolt, from the, the king of the sky, to the insecure, petty deity that he's portrayed as in, let's say, the Mahabharata. So that too was an entire journey. But of course, the second degree of research was primarily around Indra, whereas in terms of a sacred book, it was the Rig Veda that I did. Yeah.
Like these days, there are a lot of controversies around how fictional characters or historical facts are being rewritten.
Yes.
So, like, what's your take on this? How did you manage, like, sort of those things
Yeah.
so that it doesn't affect the book?
Not gonna lie, it is something that I was worried about, but I believe that as long as I was true to the core text, true to what the Rig Veda says, and most importantly, true to the original tenets of Hinduism, I had nothing to fear because I was trying to portray what God had initially wanted to portray, or the men that had written these texts initially wanted to portray. So, Samsara, if there's ever a backing that Samsara needs, it falls directly onto the Rig Veda itself. So questioning Samsara is questioning one of the, if not the oldest religious textbook in the world.
You have mentioned, like, you started imagining all this while you were in school. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot must have changed between all those years of, like, imagination and writing and rewriting. So, how is the current version different from the version which you initially imagined?
It's nothing like it. I mean, I think the bird's eye view of the world, the setting, is somewhat the same. The world divided into three equal parts. The forest, the lake, and the village is the same. But the plot, the characters, their evolution, and most importantly, the themes. I mean, that's a progression that has, has gone hand in hand with my own personal journey. If I may talk about this 10-year journey, it started off as my attempt to try and bring about India's answer to Harry Potter, and that first draft was written in no more than a year in 2011. But post that, there were multiple revisions. In fact, this book has gone through more revisions than I care to admit. And after I was done and I was sure that, I'm ready with Samsara to the best of my ability, is when I decided to level up. And the only way I could do so was to work on a lot more books, to understand how an editor thinks, how the book can be better tailored and made more interesting for the reader in order to be able to deliver the core tenets of Hinduism, right? And for that, I wanted to try and see if I could come into Penguin, to join Penguin as an editor. And, luck, hard work, whatever it is, I found myself there, and I started yet the second phase of this entire journey, to go over to edit a ton of different fiction books, non-fiction books, books I wouldn't read, books I'd love to read, and see how, and through all of those learnings, every evening I would come back and incorporate that into Samsara until the product that I'm really proud of it is today.
So, like, you are saying that you being an editor at Penguin helped reshape the storytelling in a way like that is cumulative of all the experiences you have gained over here being an editor yourself.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what it is. Samsara, before I joined Penguin, and Samsara today, it's drastically different, and it's polished. And perhaps some would say that they'd prefer the rawness of what it was earlier. But I feel that, given that the aim of this book is to try and bring to the fore forgotten core tenets of Hinduism, and what Hinduism truly stands for tenets such as ahimsa. I don't necessarily mean the one that Gandhiji had said. The core meanings of ahimsa, of samsara, of moksha, or of nirman, of karma, and how our life cycles and our actions determine so many things around us and of those living beings around us. Not to mention the the magic system that's inside it. All of these aspects have now a higher chance of reaching more and more readers across the nation because of the invaluable experience that I had at that I continue to get at Penguin.
So, like, you have been an author and like you are currently an editor at Penguin as well. So, any suggestions or any advice you will have for budding authors which may be useful for them?
Write. I believe writing is the most important. Writing is editing, it is, but dive into it, do not wait, and make sure that every time you begin your writing process for the day, you do at least half an hour of reading so that you've had a chance to breathe in. So when when the time comes to breathe out, you're poised and ready to go. Also, it helps you set yourself in that mind space, that right sort of mood that is required. But coming back to the original advice that I have, do not wait. Oftentimes, people ask, I've heard, and I too had this question when I was starting off, is what sort of, things, research, and what sort of boxes do I need to tick before I can start writing? I told myself the story. The first draft was me telling myself the story. I had no idea. I did not go in with a structure. That's obviously one take and the one way of going about it, but it's worked for me. And I think that for those who are struggling to get started, it's best to just take this approach and dive straight in.
So, Saksham, like what the Samsara is first of a trilogy of book that
Yeah.
you are planning. So, have you started writing the second part already, or like are you waiting to like get feedback sort of from the readers before like planning out the second part? So, like, what do you hope getting from this book, like getting out in the market?
So, to answer your first question, yes, I've already started writing, but I am waiting for feedback so I can incorporate it and make sure that book 2 is one that keeps the bar as high as Samsara and the initial response we've received. And in terms of what do I hope to gain from through this act, through getting Samsara out there, it's quite simple. I think readers were, and I personally have been waiting for that letter from Hogwarts. I never received it, and without the risk of any comparison, I hope that readers find themselves wanting to go to Vanyasa and be a part of that world, and that is what I hope to gain from this.
Saksham, tell us about the authors you really look up to.
Yeah. So I am a little obsessed when it comes to prose, and I want it to be lyrical, despite the fact that I'm writing a narrative and not necessarily poetry. And I'm in awe of the way that Patrick Rothfuss goes about it, the author of the Kincaid Chronicles, namely The Name of the Wind. Also, Guy Gabriel Kay. Initially, when I was starting out, there's no denying the fact that Rick Riordan and J.K. Rowling and a ton of other authors in that space, Philip Pullman, etc., had a massive influence on what I was trying to execute. But I like to embrace that, not shy away from it. I think as long as there is that originality, which I'm confident of, and it took me a while to make sure that I had my clarity right, and Samsara was truly unique. But these authors, and throughout the journey, it's been such a long journey. My reading habits have evolved, and so did the writing in this. So I'm always on the lookout for good prose, and these authors in particular, the ones that I named, Guy Gabriel Kay, Patrick Rothfuss, have had a huge influence on me.
So, if you have to list out 3 of your favorite books, which one will be?
So one is out of fantasy. It's Lord of the Flies, by William Golding. I'd say Fahrenheit 451, another dystopian novel. And definitely Lord of the Rings. That definitely has to be up there.
Okay. I think that's all for now. Thanks so much for
Thank you so much, Rajesh, for having me
having
over.
here and like giving us your time. We hope that this book perform wonderfully and like we get to see the second part very soon. Uh, like everyone, just get this book from our website. It is live, and like if you buy from us, you will get an author signed copy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you so much, Rajesh, for having me. Really appreciate it.